check our audio levels, but we're back up.
Is it the same link?
Yes, it is the same link.
It should be the same link. Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test 1 2.
Wait, is this the beginning of the stream?
Did you hear something? And then I just didn't stop.
No, there's nothing there's not going to be something that they can do.
Okay.
They're live streaming what they're seeing. They're not routed in.
Claire, can you resend the link?
Yes. Let me resend. Copy. Alright.
First, I need to tell the cities that are watching via live stream what's going on. So I'm waiting for the audio to come back.
Okay.
We might need to send them a new link too.
We will? Yes, we will need to.
Okay.
For sure.
That's not going to be good.
Right as soon as it cut it.
It dropped it, right?
Where do we have the link at?
It's on my shirt right now. Test 1 2. Test 1 2.
Just gotta send them the new link.
I just emailed it or sent it to you.
Hey, how are you? Oh, thank you so much. Do you have a new link?
I do have a new link.
Can you email it to me? Because that's how I'm going to have to get it.
It does look very good.
Sure. It's going to be Danielle, DANIELLE at Sorry, these
Test
are
1 2.
issues.
Test 1 2.
Probably needs to be pacing. Okay, you're good.
All right.
Okay. All right, everybody, if you could make your way back to your seats. I'm just being a little loud in case there are folks in the hallways. We're going to go ahead and get started again. Sorry about that. But we should be back up and running.
All right. Okay. So we have a couple people still grabbing their food. I'll talk loud. This is being recorded, so if you miss a few minutes, I know that you will cry about it, but you can go ahead and watch it later. I'm going to start over from the beginning of this slide. I'm not sure right where we cut off. So we have multiple different kinds of ethics violations. They fall into different categories. There are more than we could possibly name in this presentation. These are the big ones. Misuse of public position obviously is one of the big things that can get you in trouble. Disproportionate benefit. Obviously that is the instances in which you're voting on something which benefits you in a disproportionate way than it would benefit a general member of the public. Willful failure to file is if you're not filing your ethics certification forms, if you're not filing your financial forms. Your city attorney has all of those forms for you. If you have questions about when you need to file something, what you need to file, when is a situation in which you have to file an additional form than what you would need to file, we have all of that information for you. Just call our office and we'll get you anything that you need to have, and we'll make sure that any deadlines that you have to meet are met. Voting conflicts or conflicts of interest. I think that this one's pretty self-explanatory. You all know that obviously you can't vote on things in which you have a conflict of interest that's sort of special to you that the other members of the board wouldn't have. Solicitation or acceptance of gifts. We don't really do lobbying in city government. It's not really a thing that we encourage. Don't take gifts from people in exchange for your vote for obvious reasons. Unauthorized compensation, this falls sort of in the same line, receiving money for your vote or for doing another task which you are tasked with as a public official. And then disclosure or use of certain information. Of course, there are obviously situations in which you as commissioners will receive information. One of the most important or most blatant examples of this is when you're involved in a shade meeting. I know several of our cities have had shade meetings this year. That information is not public until after the case is closed. And as commissioners, you are responsible for keeping that information confidential. And now we have an example of what okay.
So you heard earlier, when you don't know what to do, you think you might have a problem, contact your attorney. Before you do that, because these rules are complex, but before you do that, just ask yourself 3 questions about what you're thinking about doing. It will clarify it for you. And the 3 questions are, if I take this action, will I or a family member, relative, benefit from this action in any way whatsoever? And if I take this action, or I do this thing, or I accept this gift, who's going to suffer as a result of that? Is it going to be the reputation of my government? Is it going to be the financial well-being of my government? Who's it going to be? And if the situation was reversed, is the 3rd question to ask, how would I feel about it? And if you ask yourself those questions, because A lot of times you won't be aware that you're about to do something that might get you in this arena. If you ask those 3 questions, you'll call the attorney and provide some facts before you do the action some of the time. Some of the time it's pretty obvious there's going to be no financial benefit. But those are the 3 questions. Who will I benefit from it, or somebody related to me? Who's going to suffer from this action? And what would I do if I was the one who was going to suffer?
So we have a video for you all.
Today, we're live at City Hall where City Councilman Dexhart is addressing his latest sex scandal.
Recently, certain allegations have come to light about my inappropriate conduct. I'm here to set the record straight. I totally did all of it.
Another sex scandal? This guy's unbelievable.
How does he find the time?
I also engaged in inappropriate texting, sexting, and text-nexting, which is where you send photos of your junk from the restroom of a Chili's to go. Does this make me a bad boy? You tell me. No, really, tell me. Gets me off when women tell me that.
He's really busy.
Today, we're live at City Hall where City Councilman Dexhart is addressing his latest sex scandal.
All right, so we have another short video for you of something that we would not recommend doing.
On a story we first brought you yesterday about a public Zoom meeting gone wrong, reporter Ryan Hill shows us a Vallejo Planning Commissioner is now stepping down after tossing his cat.
First, I'd like to introduce my cat.
The city says it doesn't condone Commissioner Chris Platzer's behavior on the call. In addition to tossing his cat and the beer, Platzer was seen and heard on the Zoom call for a proposed Vallejo Costco, cursing and using derogatory phrases. Since the call, the city says the mayor and another council member have put on this coming Tuesday's city council agenda an item to remove Platzer from the commission. I called, emailed, and texted Platzer to get his side of the story, but I haven't heard back from him. Some folks I talked to today tell me he should be removed.
You're being broadcast to the city and you represent us, and you're doing something that is totally outrageous to an animal, really? And it's your pet? And you're drunk?
Yeah. I was Ryan right now on a story we first brought you yesterday about a public Zoom.
That was California, right? And now they're coming here.
That could have been any municipality in any state in the entire country. So again, we're sort of going to break each of these different categories down for you. Give you a little bit more information on what to look out for, and really what you need to be aware of as commissioner, as a board member, to make sure that you are being the most ethical you can be, and representing your cities in a way that you and the rest of your board or commission would be proud of. So misuse of position is very specifically defined as no public officer, employee, or agency, or local government attorney shall corruptly use or attempt to use his or her official position or any property or resource which may be within his or her trust, or perform his or her official duties to secure a special privilege, benefit, or exemption for himself, herself, or others. Now this one is relatively self-explanatory. I think that you have all, I'm sure, had situations in which you've seen others do things which you think may be a violation of this. You've had people ask you about doing something for them, and you've had to tell them, no, that's not what I do as a commissioner, that's not what I'm able to do as a board member. And this is really important because what you're looking at here is the #1 category of ethics complaints against commissioners and board members. So what you have to do is be really, really aware that it's not only, am I violating this law technically, but am I giving the appearance that I'm violating this? does what I'm doing look like to the outside world I may be misusing my position? I may be doing something which is not ethical and within the bounds of my representation of this city. If you ever think to yourself, I wouldn't want this on the news if I did it, please call your city attorney and ask them if you should do it, because the answer is probably no. And we would really, really love to give you that information on the front end rather than trying to clean everything up on the back end, which is all of this presentation is us giving you the information that you need to make the right choices so that you don't get yourself in hot water.
Okay, so this is an example of misuse of public position, and this was in the midst of the COVID crisis, and we had a commissioner who decided to have an elite COVID vaccine group going on. At that point, someone had reported her, and they have found that she was misusing her position. I believe she was fined $8,000 as a result. Basically saying, you can't use your position as a commissioner to give certain areas, I think her neighborhood specifically, give them an advantage and have them have the COVID vaccine first. So she was ultimately fined, and I believe the case has been resolved at this point. Okay, and so in this is another case of misuse of position where there were two candidates. There was a commissioner, someone running for commissioner and someone running for school board. Sheriff Ivey in the county, he asked them to drop out of the race. I believe he said he would pay them $50,000 in a government position if he won, in exchange for them dropping out. Again, that is misusing your public position as a way to try to entice somebody to give you the advantage and you get the job. So don't do that. Hopefully that's self-explanatory, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. Do you know more about this one? Okay, because I don't know this one. I'm the only one who has not seen this.
So this is a very recent example out of Tampa where the police chief has been forced to resign. There was a traffic violation, I believe, regarding a golf cart. A golf cart was pulled over, and instead of doing what normal citizens do, which is pay a fine or try to talk themselves out of it to the police officer, the Tampa police chief decided that she was going to pull out her badge and tell them that she was the police chief in Tampa, and therefore she should not be required to pay a citation, get a ticket, any of these other things. Of course, as soon as anyone found out about this and it ended up on the news, here she is having resigned. So not a great idea, and we wouldn't recommend it. Do not say I am the commissioner of, I am the president of, I'm the mayor of to anyone if you're trying to get anything other than donations to the city. So there was a St. Augustine Beach commissioner, St. Augustine Beach commissioner, who intervened during the arrest of his wife in very similar circumstances to the previous example. I believe we have more information on the next slide. It was a DUI. So it was his wife got pulled over for a DUI. There was some involvement, and in a very similar way, this commissioner decided it would be a good idea to say that he was the commissioner of St. Augustine Beach, and that for that reason, the DUI should not be prosecuted in the same way that it otherwise would be. So all of these are examples of, and I believe that that's our last example. All of these are examples of saying, because I am a public official, I should get special treatment, I should receive something special, I should get this benefit that other people in the community cannot receive or do not receive. So be careful when you're making decisions. Again, it's that, would I want this to end up on the news? Do I want a video of this on TikTok? Probably not. And so for those reasons, think to yourself, do I want this to be a TikTok video? If the answer is no, please don't do it.
Good advice. So there's a lot of penalties other than becoming TikTok famous in a bad way or being on the news. Impeachment or removal, suspension from office is one penalty. Termination, employment or suspension in employment without pay, demotion, reduction in salary, forfeiture of up to 1/3 of your annual salary, civil penalties, so paying up to $10,000, paying restitution, public censure and reprimand, and loss of retirement. So other than not wanting to make your city, your county look bad, not going viral for the worst reasons, there's a lot of other financial and other reasons to avoid misuse of position. And part of misuse of position that is seen quite often, I think it's one of the largest subcategories of misuse that is reported, is nepotism, which the definition is public officials may not advocate for or appoint, employ, promote, or advance a relative in the agency in which the public official is serving. So at the end of the day, you can't be a commissioner who says, hey guys, I have a really, really good nephew. I'd really like to employ them. Let's just go ahead and vote them in to whatever the role may be. Let's avoid nepotism. So relative is super technical. And you'll see some hypotheticals after this. It's basically, if you have a question, look at the definition, because the obvious, your father, mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, so on and so forth, are clearly part of relative. What was that? That's right. But then you have these obscure hypotheticals, right? Like you have, what if it's your ex-mother-in-law, or what if it is your second cousin, or what if it's your, I don't know, your cousin's dog's aunt's best friend. Like you have to look, clearly that's not one, but you have to look at the definition to say, okay, does this fall under a relative? But like anything else, if it doesn't pass the smell test, if you're really not sure, it doesn't sound right, call the city attorney. They'll tell you exactly what's in the definition. They will make sure that you are not violating this nepotism statute. And we have a wonderful example of this from The Office. Oh. Right here? Okay.
You arrived. The conference is supposed to be at 9. Here you go, Big O. Tiny? Carol Hannah.
It says decaf. Decaf?
Ooh, yeah. There's been some sort of mix-up there. You could just drink it, or should I drive all the way back?
One summer, I blew on my knee playing softball. Ended up watching CNN most of the time. I don't know how we're gonna get out of Afghanistan. I hate the new system. He's only been here for a week. I hate him.
Big guy sucks. Calls me the Nard Man. I'm the Nerd Dog, okay? Nard Man is my father. My name is Luke Cooper. I love cinema. My favorite movies are Citizen Kane and Boondock Saints.
That kid is the worst. Needs to be fired, Michael.
He's not the worst, okay? He's not the worst. You know who's the worst? That intern we had a few years ago. That guy, remember? That face, how ugly he was? He was the worst. Good worker, though. It's not gonna change.
He messed yours up, so he's got to go, Mike.
It's just coffee, guys. But yeah, I'll look into it, okay?
Luke,
What's up, Venus?
did you send those samples to Justin at Lehigh Motors yesterday? Because he didn't get them.
If you asked me to do it, I did.
Yes, strawberries are right. Hey, turn off the Chumbawamba and scram, twerp.
You don't have to yell.
Okay, rude. Luke, I want you to go to the supermarket for me before to get some ice cream for everybody. It's National Ice Cream Afternoon. Great. And another thing I did this summer, I hired my nephew. Having Luke here is
So obviously it causes problems. Do not hire your relatives, avoid it at all costs. Clearly this is one of many ways it could go clearly awry. And like I said, it's a super hyper technical definition, so we do have some examples for you, but again, the takeaway being, if you don't know, call and ask. But in this example, can the city manager hire his stepson? Say no. Good job. Yep. And okay, the new city manager's spouse's stepmother's work at City Hall. Can the city manager promote her or recommend her for promotion? Can the city manager or city commission employ a commissioner's niece as city clerk? And what if the commissioner abstains from the vote? Okay. You're killing it. You're like, what, 4 for 4?
You should repeat the answers for
You are
those that
reading
can't
up.
hear.
What was that?
You should repeat the answers for those
Yes,
that cannot
that
hear.
was, no, he cannot, even if he abstains from the vote, they cannot hire his niece, I think is what it was. Yeah, so, that's right. Would you like to take the next example?
Can two sisters serve on the same board? Excuse me. What about working in the same city?
Was that a yes? Was that a yes?
You'll get the answer on the next slide. I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to spoil it. All right. Yes, the answer to both of those questions is yes. Two sisters can work at the same city and they can work on the same board. Yes, as long, obviously the same sunshine laws apply. They can't talk to each other outside of commission meetings or board meetings about matters that could come before the board because that would be a violation of the sunshine law. But other than that, there's no nepotism issue with both sisters being on the same board or both sisters being employed at the city. Sure.
My understanding is that someone can serve as a commissioner or a board member, husband, wife, and different boards. One is a commissioner. How do you deal with sunshine like that? I mean, I know it's permitted, and as you said, you know, outside of the room. How do you control that? How is that permitted? That I have an issue with.
The question is, we understand, with the understanding that it is permissible for husband and wife or two sisters to serve on the same board or the same commission, how do you deal with the sunshine law implications of that? That's the question. The answer is, when you take a public office, you have an ethical responsibility to follow the laws that are put in front of you. So what happens is, a lot of the time you don't see people who are related to each other serving on the same board, and it's for that reason. Because what you often see is if they both serve on the board or on the commission, you'll have a problem with citizens being upset, filing ethics violations. The Ethics Commission gets involved. There is a very intense investigation because that is something that I don't think that the Ethics Commission would be too terribly surprised to hear that a husband and wife or two sisters were sharing information outside of a public meeting. And so what you get yourself into is a situation where, is it allowed? Yes. Do you put yourself into a position where you can get complained to the Ethics Commission, and that you can put yourself in a position where you're under investigation for violations of the Sunshine Law? Also yes. So it is allowed, but it is fraught. Yes. So voting conflicts of interest. A member of a board, commission, or agency who is present at a meeting at which an official decision, ruling, or other official act is to be taken or adopted may not abstain from voting unless there is, or appears to be, a possible conflict of interest. So something that's really important here to note is that the way that this rule is put together is that unless there's a conflict, which is something that we don't often talk about, you're not allowed to abstain from voting. So there has to be a conflict in order for you to say, I'm going to abstain from this vote. Otherwise, you're required to make a vote. Now, what is a conflict of interest? What appears to be is another question. A lot of this because, and I think that this is something that we as attorneys sit with and are uncomfortable with because we like hard and fast rules, we like things that have bright line tests, and unfortunately, the law isn't always like that. What we have are ethics commission rulings, we have case law, we have statutes, we have attorney general opinions, and from all of that, we're able to give you case-by-case information on, is this a conflict, is this not a conflict? But often what we find is that it really is the smell test. So if it feels wrong, most of the time it is. Now sometimes it feels wrong and it's not. But what we always do, and how Scott has always had us practice here at Folds Walker, is that if you're going to be wrong about something, it's better to be wrong on the safe side than to be wrong on the dangerous side, which is what our opinion will always be to you if there are murky areas, which unfortunately in ethics, there are murky areas. I wish that there was a bright line rule. If there was, it would be on the slide, and that's what we would do. But that's why we have the city attorney, and that's why we're here for you all, to give you the best information that we can and answer your questions on a case-by-case basis.
Of course, and I can add just really quick to that. Everything Kirsten said, 100%. Just a reminder about the other resource, the Commission on Ethics. So a lot of times, I mean, it does come down to the smell test. It's not a conflict, but you're just not sure. And you can call us, and we can say, look, it is not technically a conflict. You can vote. But if you want another source as well, you can call the Commission on Ethics. We can call the Commission on Ethics. They'll say, hey, there are 20 opinions. Send them to you now. Let's read through those. In this case, it was found to be a conflict. In this case, it was not. And so that gives you again, it's still not bright line. It just gives you a little bit more peace of mind. You have multiple attorneys, all the way up to the state level, telling you, look, it's not a conflict, but if you feel uncomfortable in this situation, then in this case, you have been able to abstain from a vote for that reason. So just as another resource.
So on the voting conflict, you're going to see the agenda before it comes out. 99% of the voting conflicts I got were the day of the meeting. And hopefully it was early in the day. A lot of times it was 5 minutes before the meeting started. So these determinations are based on facts. And in order to get the facts, you got to have some time. So I did what Scott Walker said, err on the safe side and not put the public official at risk of an ethics complaint, which is a pain in you-know-what. And I would say my advice to you is not to vote and declare a voting conflict, because the risk is too great and we don't have time. Now, we could defer the action in order for us to get an answer, but the answer we give on the spur of the moment is usually not going to be the best answer to these fact-specific inquiries.
Another video about... Oh, perfect.
Now, people, I know it's an unpleasant subject, but the deer population in this town is reaching monstrous proportions.
Not this again.
Always going on about the deer.
Leave them alone, Taylor. But they're taking over the town. We need to institute partial elimination.
Partial elimination?
You want to kill the little romping Bambis?
People, do I have to detail the problems that these deer cause?
No, but you will.
Lyme disease, auto accidents, plane accidents.
We have flying deer? Oh, that's scary.
Yeah, those ones you can snuff.
But the worst problem is the crop loss. Dean, hand me the blow up, please.
Hey, Dean, he's paying you for all this, right?
Yeah. Really? How much?
People, this is a randomly chosen but typical landscaped area in the town that was denuded by these ruminant pests.
Randomly chosen?
Taylor, that's your backyard.
This is a little self-serving.
Might be my yard.
Might be. Taylor, no one else has a kiss the gardener sign.
This is a trumped-up problem. So, none of you are interested in addressing this scourge?
I have a thought.
Go ahead.
A controlled hunt.
Guns?
Not guns. Wolves.
What?
You release a pack of wolves, they eat the deer, problem solved. Of course, then you'll have to deal with your wolf problem.
I say that we defer this unsavory topic for another year.
Now, wait a minute.
All those in favor? Aye. Taylor's opposed. Meeting adjourned.
Okay, so more on voting conflicts of interest. If the official decision, ruling, or act occurs in the context of a quasi-judicial proceeding, a member may abstain from voting on such matter if such abstention is to assure a fair proceeding free from potential bias or prejudice. So again, that just goes to what we were just talking about, the appearance of a conflict. And again, calling your city attorney's office, calling the Commission on Ethics are your go-tos to getting to the bottom of it.
So this is the statute, which talks about the technical definition of a voting conflict and the rule against it. So you are not permitted as a public officer to vote in your official capacity in any measure, and these underlined words are really your key words to focus on, which would inure to his or her special private gain or loss, or which would inure to the special private gain or loss of any principal by whom you are retained, or by the parent, organization, or subsidiary of a corporate principal by whom you are retained, or any other agency as defined in the statute, or which would inure to the special private gain or loss of a relative or business associate. So you'll notice that the underlined words here that are repeating themselves are special, private, gain, or loss. What that means is special is not, oh, this is so special to me. Special is in comparison with all of the other members of your community. Are you going to gain or lose more, substantially more, in a way that makes your interest in this specific matter special in comparison with those other members? So, for instance, if you have 100% stake in Tables R Us, and I say I would like the commission to vote on whether or not Tables R Us should be the exclusive place that we buy tables from as a community, that would inure to my special private gain or loss, because, for instance, Wayne Clark from the city of Williston, Wayne Carson, is not going to benefit from my sale of the tables to the city of Williston, but I will. No other member of the community is going to benefit in the way that I will benefit from that. Now, it needs to be something that is really special, and what you're looking for in here is a lot of the time people say, oh, I'm employed with this business. Is the city allowed to do business with them? Often the answer is yes. It needs to be something that is particular and special, and there has to be some substantial gain or loss. If you're ever concerned, who do you call? The city attorney or the ethics commission. We're killing it over here. Great answers. I feel like we could just end the presentation right now. Everyone knows everything they need to know. So what happens if you do find that you're in a situation where you can't vote on something? You have a voting conflict, and so you're not permitted to vote on this topic. Well, first you have to say in the public meeting that you have a voting conflict on this matter. Then you have to disclose what the conflict is. So why is it that there is a conflict? Then you have to abstain from voting. And then you have to file a Form 8B within 15 days of the vote. Form 8B is something that city attorney's office can provide to you upon your request. We just have everything here. Yes, your clerk will often also have this form. If you have questions about how to fill it out, if you have questions about what any of it means, please contact us. When you abstain from voting, you don't have to leave the room. We recommend that you get off the dais and not participate in the voting process at all. That way that there's no question about whether or not you were part of the vote. And that way we don't have to do cleanup on the back end. So it's always, always better to make it really clean on the front end, and that way we don't have any issues on the back end. So we recommend you get off the dais and don't participate if you do have a voting conflict.
Are you going to take questions at the end?
I will take questions at the end, yes. Okay, so special private gain or loss, economic benefit. What you have to look at is what is the size of the affected class? Is the result remote or speculative? And is it merely a preliminary or procedural matter? So all of these are important considerations when determining, is it a special private gain or loss that would result in a voting conflict which could get you in trouble. So what you have to look at, the first category, what is the size of the affected class? Is it, if we're voting on should we put a school in this general neighborhood, and you live next to the school, but so do 100 other people, the class is large. And so that is going to impact whether or not that's a special gain or loss. Will your kids be able to go to that school? Potentially. But so will a large group of other people's kids. And so it's not to your special, particular gain or loss in that situation. Now, is the result remote and speculative? If we're making a determination on, and this also goes to the second category, if we're making a determination on rezoning. So we have a parcel of property, we know from the developer that they intend to make it a school. But right now, all we're doing is rezoning the property. We've not received any information formally submitted from the developer that says we're going to make this a school. So all that we're doing right now is rezoning this property to make it available as a school. The result being remote and speculative, in that case, what you're going to look at is, we think it will probably be a school, but right now, we don't know. They could make it 100 other things, and that does not, at this point, inure to your special gain or loss. So those are all things that you have to take a look at, and those are all things that we'll talk with you through. The Ethics Commission will talk with you through if you ever call them and ask if there is a voting conflict. Okay, let's do a little test. Is it a prohibited conflict of interest when two city commissioners want to solicit advertising revenue from city vendors for their company? Not a conflict at this point. So what this goes to is that third prong that we're talking about, is that it's remote and it's speculative. So it's not it's not something that is a direct benefit right now. It could potentially be a benefit in the future on a future vote that we take, but this vote right now is remote and speculative. So if you have a potential to become one, if the relationship with the company could tempt a compromise of duties as city commissioners, were the company to begin soliciting revenue from city vendors. So it's that one step forward would be a voting conflict, could be a voting conflict, but the step that we're taking now doesn't quite reach that voting conflict standard. Is there a prohibited conflict of interest for a city commissioner to remain employed by a nonprofit food bank receiving grant funding from the city? No. But the commissioner must comply with the voting conflict rules. So you can't participate in the grant application to the city, and you can't be directly compensated as a result of the grant. So it can't be that you are the one that's writing the grant, and if you write the grant and it's successful, you get a bonus or a benefit financially from that. So it's a little bit more complicated, and with all of these ethics issues, there's always layers and layers and layers of information that you have to work through, which is why we have the Ethics of Commission, or the Commission on Ethics, and why you have your city attorney's office. All right, before we jump into the next section, I think that there are a couple of questions. Does anyone have questions on voting conflicts? Yes.
If the lead person on the board or position is abstaining or has to abstain from voting, should that person also abstain from the discussion on the issue?
It's best practice. Oh, yes. If someone does have to abstain from voting, the question is, if someone has to abstain from voting because there is a conflict of interest, can they still participate in the discussion on that topic, or should they not participate in the discussion on that topic? I heard the smell test, and I appreciate that that is now one of our buzzwords. Generally speaking, the reason that we ask you to get off the dais is for a good reason. So if you're up on the dais and you're saying, well, I'm just going to speak on this issue now as a citizen, but you're sitting up on the dais, now you've sort of got yourself into a little bit of a pickle sometimes. So we recommend you not do it. Is it technically a violation? There's 100 Attorney General opinions on it, back and forth. It depends on how much you participated in the conversation. What did you participate in the conversation? What did the other commissioners copy what you said and use it in their analysis on how they're going to vote? So it becomes a really fact-specific answer to your question. But generally, it's the reason we ask you to step down. Because then if you step down off the dais and you're not participating in the discussion from the dais, you can, I suppose, you could, if you really felt like it, go into the public and make comment on the issue, but we always recommend that you just err on the side of caution, not make your city attorney go through 100 Attorney General opinions to find out how much you participated, whether other commissioners decided based on what you said. It's always best practice to, if you're going to be wrong on the safe side, not the dangerous side. Any other questions on that?
And that's also where you have the appearance again, right? So even though you may technically be able to participate, if you don't think you should, if it seems like it's going to be an issue, it is okay to say, in this case, I'm stepping off, I'm not commenting, I'm just keeping it to myself. So.
I have a question. Let's say I have a conflict of interest on the dais, on the commission. What does that do to my ability to go and advocate to the TNC? I'm the commissioner, I have a conflict on the commission. I show up to a separate meeting to the planning zone. I advocate to the planning zone.
Are you advocating as a citizen? Or are you there in your official capacity?
I say, my name is Jordan Marlowe. Everybody in the room knows I'm the mayor.
You're the mayor?
Okay, the question is, and I'm going to let Dave Wagner answer this question, but I'll repeat it. The question is, if I'm a commissioner with a voting conflict and I decide to not vote on the commission because I have that conflict, but I go to the Planning and Zoning Board and I want to speak on the issue, same issue that would come before the commission, can I do that? And here's Dave Wagner with years more experience than me to answer that.
What I would do is, I don't know the answer to that question, so I get the facts from you, and then I would pick up the phone and call the Commission on Ethics with the facts, maybe with you in the conversation, and ask them what they think of it. I'd research it, but I wouldn't give an answer like right now. I'd do the research. Yeah, I know. And
Are you gonna shut me down?
I think I would advise you to wait till I get some research done and a chance to talk to the Commission on Ethics.
If you're just absolutely going to go there and do it, my advice would be to not do that. And the reason is it's erring on the side of safety. And, you know, I've had Commission on Ethics complaints filed against city officials, and there's a lot of work that goes into that. And if you are found guilty of the ethics violation, and I could give you examples of situations where I didn't feel there was in fact an ethics violation, some minimal thing happened for a commissioner and he gets fined $500, but then in addition to that, there's the attorney's fees, and you cannot recoup those funds from your municipality if you're found to have violated the ethics. Now, the reverse is opposite. If you are found not to have been guilty of an ethics violation, then you can recoup your funds for the attorney that's representing you in the investigation stage, and ultimately, if there's probable cause, then it goes in front of the Commission on Ethics, and they may make a determination of whether or not you violate or not, and the attorney really needs to be there if you're in that dicey of a situation. Somebody in Tallahassee needs to be there, or we need to drive up and represent. You're just talking about a lot of investment, and the potential for the downside would be quite huge. I think you probably are not, without researching it, as Dave says, I think you probably could go there and advocate at a board where you're not making the decision. I think that probably would be where, but it's just so dicey. I would say don't do it.
Would it be the chair's responsibility, the attorney's responsibility to notify the board, hey, this person is going to be allowed to speak, but they're speaking against our advice. We believe there may be a potential conflict, we advise them not to speak, so the P&Z board knows that this person is bulldogging the points against the advice of legal.
What I would do, Jordan, is I would not, the question is, does the attorney have an obligation, does the chair of the board have an obligation to disclose that this person is continuing to advocate, even though we've advised not to? What I would do is send an email to that council member and say, hey, I'm suggesting you, even if it's 5 minutes before, I would jot something out real quick and say, my suggestion is not to do it. I would be hesitant to say something in a public meeting that is based upon my conversation with you on a direct basis. That would be, but I'm documenting that I'm giving you this advice, and here's where we're going with it. You choose not, you're sailing on your own. That's how I've handled it.
All right, so next up, we're going to talk about presents. I mean, it is almost Christmas, so gifts and unauthorized compensation. No public officer, employee of an agency, local government, attorney, or candidate for nomination or election shall solicit or accept anything of value, including a gift, loan, reward, promise of future employment, favor, or service based upon any understanding that the vote, official action, or judgment of the public officer, employee, local government attorney, or candidate would be influenced. So this goes back to the example we used earlier where the one commissioner is trying to get the school board and commissioner to drop out of the race and says, hey guys, I'll pay you $50,000 salary if you just drop out, make my job easy so I can win this election. It's unauthorized compensation. Next slide. And here's another example of it. Miami-Dade commissioner charged in corruption case. So it looks like in this, he had been eyeing to run for sheriff. Wait, do you know this one? Good.
So there was a supermarket that had all of these unauthorized storage containers on their property, and he accepted a $15,000 gift from the supermarket to push through legislation that allowed the storage containers to continue to exist there. And the legislation didn't pass, but he was still fined. He was still convicted. He was still found guilty of an ethics violation. So just know, even if you didn't do a good job at pushing the legislation through, you might still be in trouble.
All right, another one. Do you have this too, Dee?
So, yeah, so this is a case which can show you exactly what it is that you're up against if you decide that it's in your best interest to accept gifts or violate other ethical laws. This case has been going on for years and years and years, and the history is very complicated. I encourage you all to look it up, but essentially, for you all's purposes, what you need to know is Scott Maddox, the former Democratic Party chair, decided that he wasn't subject to the same ethical rules as everybody else, violated those rules, and years later has been sentenced to 5 years in prison for federal corruption. So that harkens back to when we were talking about where do all these rules come from. This is not, we're not just talking about you don't get to be a commissioner anymore. We're not talking about a $20 fine. We're talking about prison, jail, thousands of dollars in fines, really serious consequences. So this is an example to show you, please don't do it. Please, 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 don't do it. Right, generally it was a bribery case such that he was receiving bribes in order to facilitate businesses doing business with the city. Okay, so here's a little question regarding gifts. So you received Taylor Swift tickets. They are, I'm sure you've all seen the controversy.
You can get me some tickets. If you don't know the tickets.
So you received these tickets from the donor to the city. They're worth $800, but the face value says 0. Do you need to disclose them on your disclosure form? Yes, you need to disclose it on your disclosure form. A lot of the time, these donors to the city will say, oh, well, this isn't worth anything. We definitely recommend that if you receive anything from anyone and you think this may have some value to someone, even if the person giving it to me says that it has no value, that you take a look at it and see if it does have some value. Okay, so you're given an honorary membership at the local country club. Do we have to report it? Yes, we have to report it. The consequences of reporting it and it not being something that you need to report are nothing. The consequences of not reporting it and it being something that you do need to report are very, very serious. So we always recommend that you just report, disclose, all of that. So, the Florida Commission on Ethics recommended the removal recently of an Escambia County commissioner. She received gifts from lobbyists, which the commission says violated the gift disclosure laws. And obviously his attorney says that he had no intention to violate the law. Unfortunately, ethics are not something that requires a specific mindset in most situations. So a lot of the time in criminal law, you have to have, I'm sure everyone's heard, intent to murder, intent to do such and such, right? You have to have a special mindset. With ethics, most of the time, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you wanted to violate the law. It doesn't matter if you did it on purpose. If you violate the ethics law, if you don't disclose what you're supposed to disclose, if you don't follow the rules, the consequences are the same. Yes, please, not now. Yes, remind me tomorrow. All right. Okay, doing business with London Loan Agency.
We all have a question.
Okay, we have some questions about gifts.
Christmas time.
Yes.
Are we allowed to give gifts to city employees? If you're a commissioner, are you allowed to give like $10 bill? You want to go to a restaurant?
It looks like.
Allowed to give a Christmas gift.
So the question is, if you are a commissioner and you would like to give a gift to city employees, a gift card or something of that nature, are you permitted to do so? Dave has stood up, so I'm going to give the mic to him.
The answer is yes, because the prohibition is on you receiving gifts. Right. And just let me add one thing about gifts that's not well known. And it might be in the PowerPoint or not, but I'm going to mention it now because I had a county commissioner get in a bind on this. Basically, if you're a reporting individual or a procurement employee, you cannot accept any gifts from anybody worth more than $100. Okay? It has nothing to do with reporting. If you accept the gift, it's a violation of the code. And the way, the ethics code, the way these things are a lot of times enforced are people file complaints. And so the fact situation that I'm aware of involved a fairly successful and wealthy developer in this community who was supporting an important fundraising effort for, and the way they did that is they had a big dinner, and the cost of a table with 6 people was $15,000 in donations. So the developer invited a county commissioner and spouse to sit on the table. Unbeknownst to them, the value of that dinner was far more than $100. Somebody found out about it and basically didn't file an ethics complaint, called me. And so I said, let me talk to the county commissioner, which I did. And I said, it looks to me like you got a problem, but let's ask the Ethics Commission for a formal opinion, because this was about 20, 25 years ago. It wasn't totally clear. Long and short of it is that County Commissioner wisely realized it was a problem, got an attorney in Tallahassee, and paid a fine, and never did it again. And it wasn't done with any intent whatsoever. It was just not being aware of that. So if you are, as they say, right, a reporting individual or procurement employee, you can't accept any gifts valued at more than $100. This comes up and being invited to the president's box at the University of Florida for football games. You have to pay part of it to keep it under $100.
Thanks, David. Sure. Yes.
What is a confidential transcript in Florida Sunshine Law?
Shade me, probably, but I think they used to know that.
That is exactly what it is. So if you have, oh, the question is, what is a confidential transcript in Florida Sunshine Law? The answer is, it's exactly what we were talking about earlier with disclosure of information. Those are your shade meeting transcripts. Those are ongoing litigation. There's a closed meeting, which is recorded by a court reporter. And after the litigation is fully concluded, the contents of that meeting are then published to the public. But during the pendency of the litigation, the shade meeting, which is what we colloquially call it, is kept under wraps in order to allow the city or municipality to effectively settle the case and negotiate. For obvious reasons, you don't want the person on the other side to know that you have $100,000 going into negotiation, when you might be able to whittle it down to 50 if that's all that they think you have. So it's for settlement purposes, for negotiation purposes, and ongoing litigation. That's usually what you'll find. So that's the confidential information that you find.
All right, so doing business with one's own agency. No employee of an agency acting in his or her official capacity as a purchasing agent or public officer acting in his or her capacity shall either directly or indirectly purchase, rent, or lease any realty, goods, or services for his or her own agency from any business entity of which the officer or employee or the officer's or employee's spouse or child is an officer, partner, director, or proprietor, or in which such officer or employee or the officer or employee's spouse or child or any combination of them has marital interest. Material, God, family law, sorry. So that's a mouthful to say that one of the prohibitions is doing business with one's own agency. It's relatively straightforward. And there's an exception that the competitive bidding, when a business is transacted by a rotation system among qualified suppliers, emergency purchase, sole source within a city after disclosure. So I think the most common, and Scott could speak to this, is the sole source. If you have a small city, you have super hyper-technical material needs. So you need somebody to make, I need an example here, some kind of airplane, and there is one person in the 200-mile radius or 500, it's just there is nobody else that can possibly put a bid in for this. So you're going to have the sole source issue there. That may be an exception. But again, with anything, you call the city attorney, the commissioner on ethics, if you have any questions on that. All right, inside information. Current or former public officers, employees, or local government attorneys may not disclose or use information that is not available to the general public and gained by reason of his or her official position, except for information relating exclusively to governmental practices for his or her personal gain or benefit, or for the personal gain or benefit of any other person or entity. So, this is self-explanatory too. You find out something in your capacity as commissioner. You know that some new store wants to come into town, and you say, okay, hang on, I know some land for sale, I'm gonna swipe this up, I'm gonna make a sweet deal off of this, and I'm also gonna take a commission as a result. So not only am I gonna come in and sell the property, I'm not a licensed broker, but I'm taking a commission too. Again, you can't do that. You're using inside information to benefit yourself or your family, and that is gonna get you in trouble. And here it is. You have Mickey Rosado. He pleaded guilty. He was on the Cape Coral City Council, and he tried to operate as a broker without a license and misused the confidential information to buy a property that I believe was being used for some store coming in or something like that. Yeah. All right. We've gone over this in the beginning, I believe, but financial disclosures. Any officer who's required by Article 8 of the state constitution to file full and public disclosure of his or her financial interest for any calendar or fiscal year, or any other person required by law to file a disclosure under this section shall file that disclosure with the Florida Commission on Ethics. Call the city attorney's office. They have the form. You fill it out yearly. And I think that's where you check off that you've attended the presentation too. So you two birds, one stone. That adds up quick. Yeah. So if you fail to file, it's $25 a day up to $1,500. So just don't fail to file. Okay. So I don't know how much this is applicable here with the limited versus full disclosure. That's what I was thinking. I think everyone here is limited disclosure. So you're all filling out a Form 1. Other constitutional officers have a Form 6. But if it was applicable to you, we would talk about it. I don't think we need to go into detail on that right now, though. Okay, so this town, I don't know if y'all have heard of Hallandale Beach, but they have just had a lot of corruption scandal over the past few years. Let's see which ones they have this year. So Anthony Sanders resigns amid allegations of wrongdoing. Oh, yes. Yeah, very real. So in this case, let's see here. He, as a commissioner, engaged in a pattern of misconduct in awarding of city grants and other funding. Doesn't he own a church too? Isn't that what's going on? Here we go. Okay. So he uses his position as Hallandale Beach Commissioner to approve $1 million in funding for a nonprofit owned by his church. To make payments, even worse. Okay. And to his immediate family, so his church and family. He failed to disclose those payments, and obviously he got in trouble there. At one point, let's see, his wife served as executive director of the nonprofit, and he engaged in a pattern of misconduct, violated the Florida ethics laws, and don't do that. And I think this is Hallandale as well. Yes, so like I said, Hallandale. In this case, we're talking about the mayor. So Hallandale Mayor Joy Cooper, she was acquitted of all charges, but you gotta go to the next page so I know what happened. Oh, do you know what happened?
She was attending foundation board meeting but not notice to the public. That was one of the big catch-alls that they were, and we're gonna get into Sunshine Law here in a minute, that will all make sense. But there was a lot of gray of what was going on, so I'm pretty sure she resigned, didn't she? I think she resigned.
But yeah, if you Google Hallandale Beach, I think we've used them for several examples in the past, so they need to attend the presentation. All right, so again, with an ethics violation, you're looking at a risk of attorney's fees. If someone files an ethics violation and you are successful, you will be reimbursed. But here's the thing, if you're not, you're out of luck. You're going to be paying your attorney's fees, you're going to be looking at anything between civil fines, losing your position, losing retirement pay, whatever it may be. There's just above and beyond attorney's fees, there's a lot of reasons to listen to your city attorneys, listen to the Commission on Ethics, follow these rules, and ask questions if you're not sure. All right.
Okay, we are halfway there. We're more than halfway there. Mostly because it's 7 o'clock, and if we were halfway there, you all would revolt. So now we're going to talk about Sunshine Law. We'll get into public records, and then that's when you know we're just about done. And for this, we're going to turn it over to Danielle.
I'm rocking with y'all. All right, so Sunshine Law is going to be governed by a couple of different areas that you can look to if you're ever having issues. Florida statute section 286.011 is what mandates that that public meetings be open to the public, and they have to be reasonably noticed ahead of time. So you can't have a meeting in a public building but not tell anyone. You're like, oh, well, it was in City Hall. We just didn't give you guys a heads up. So please don't do that. None of you do it now. Let's keep it that way. And then the Constitution reiterates the same thing of they have to be open to the public at all times. Minutes have to be provided reasonably shortly thereafter. I don't know the exact language off the top of my head, but you can't wait 3 weeks to make the minutes available to folks. Next slide. So, really quick, why do we need sunshine law? Florida is a super open state when it comes to public record and when it comes to these meetings, and it allows for a really unique way for us to govern with the public. We're really working with the public to achieve the city's goals. It's not like that everywhere. Florida is really unique in that way. It's why we have Florida Man when we get to public records. I'll kind of touch on that. We're not as crazy as everyone says we are. It's just our public records laws. That's what I'm going to tell myself. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've talked about this before. If people get up during public comment and they are entitled to their 3 minutes, as long as they are not engaging in hate speech, curse words, personal attacks. We have rules of conduct in all of our cities, and I know sometimes in our city meetings we'll read them ahead of time just to remind everybody. It's a good refresher. We tend to forget our procedures and that they're in there. So, but for the most part, you do need to let citizens get up there and speak. So this is a lovely Parks and Rec clip to emphasize that.
The ideas are what shine in our meetings.
What are you, some kind of moron? Why don't you have hand dryers in the park bathrooms? They're so much more sanitary than paper towels. Anyone knows that.
My dog went to one of your parks and ate another dog's feces, and I'm going to sue you for that.
How you like it? How you like that? Now, Max, you're holding coffee.
With the government shut down, who's going to stop Al-Qaeda?
One thing at a time. I don't like obscenities just as much as you don't like
No, it
them.
drives me crazy. I have kids.
Right. But,
I've got my little 3-year-old, and I'm going through the park, and someone's like, hey, Mike, the guys use Mike, Ed.
these people are members of a community that care about where they live. So what I hear when I'm being yelled at is people caring loudly at me.
Parks and Rec is always spot on when I watch episodes of Parks and Rec. Sometimes I think that they sit in on our commission meetings and that's how they get their notes. Right, you just show up and you just take notes and you're like, all right, that's episode 32. So again, what's required? Reasonable notice, notifying the public ahead of time that the meeting's happening, where it's happening. It has to be held in a place that the public can access. We've had some questions in our cities as of late in regard to different boards meeting in places that are semi-public. It's hard for the public to get to. The public really can't get into it. You cannot do that. If it's a public meeting, it has to happen in a place where the public can access. In addition to that, as I mentioned before, the meeting minutes need to be promptly reported. I think our city clerks and city staff in our cities are really good about that. We're very fortunate. I've never had an issue that I've seen come forth in our office of that happening. We're very fortunate about our city staff. So what is reasonable notice? Again, it's telling them ahead of time. It's telling them, conveying it in a manner such that they're going to have access to the notice. So it's not, I slipped a note under the local water fountain that we're having a meeting and you can attend if you want. It's putting it out on your website. It's publishing it in the local newspaper, depending on what your city does. So it's making sure that the public has access to that notice such that they can attend that meeting. Location and time, you can't say we're having a meeting, but we're not going to tell you where. You need to tell them who's meeting. It's not, we're having a meeting. And that's the end of my sentence. No, is it the commission meeting? Is your P&Z meeting? Is your CRA meeting? And then reasonable time and timely depends on the circumstances. Lawyers love the phrase, it depends. If you have a question, call your city attorney. That's what we're here for. Again, and I really I hit on this, so I'm not going to reiterate to you, I'm sorry. Clearly, I'm really excited to tell you guys about sunshine law, so I'm blazing through stuff before I get to the PowerPoint slide. But they need to be able to hear you. They need to be able to access the building. You can't tell them that they can't attend. I feel like we're all on the same page on that one. Next slide. I have another video for you guys. I really like these videos.
Now, if you all would kindly look under your chairs, you will find a special surprise. A flyer with details about the project and friendship bands that I've made for each and every one of you. So now, I guess we are park pals.
You should see the booger under his chair.
Andy.
I'm afraid this park will raise my taxes.
Well, fear not. Between the normal parks budget and our corporate partners,
I'm also afraid the park will be noisy and full of spiders and dark at nighttime. I'm scared of a lot of stuff. Everything's fine. I'm fine. I'm Walter and I'm fine.
Is this gonna be a topless park?
I don't think there are topless parks.
Well, let's build the first one and be heroes.
If this is going to be a topless park, I will sign your petition.
If she's going to the topless park, I'm not signing the topless park petition. You know, I take that back. I'm still in. What's up in Harris?
Yeah, forget whatever that Pawnee Commons is. I'm with that pervert. Topless park. Topless park. Topless park. Topless park.
Hey, how was the forum?
Crappy. We only got 4 signatures. 2 of them were me and Andy, and one of them said Farts McCool. I just don't know how.
Just another emphasizing moment of First Amendment rights and the crazy things that happen at city commission meetings. All right, big takeaways. You have to give the public the chance to speak. You absolutely have to have time for public comment. I've seen all of your agendas. I know that's not an issue. Just wanted to reiterate, tomorrow we cannot wake up and decide that we are not going to have public comment. That would be a no-no. Your time limit has to be content neutral. So you can't be limiting your time to try to prevent certain groups of people talking about certain topics. So I can't be a commissioner, and I know Scott Walker is going to show up tonight. I don't like Scott Walker. I cannot make Scott Walker only speak for 2 minutes when everyone else is allotted 5 minutes. You have to give them the opportunity to speak. You have to give them the opportunity to speak about what they want to speak about. Yes, ma'am. I beg your pardon? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it would generally, the rules differ from city to city, number one. I know some cities will allow 5 minutes of public comment at the top of the meeting, just about anything and everything. And then for each agenda item, as soon as a motion's made, you have to allow public comment, but the time may vary depending on what your rules of procedure are. So let's say it's 2 minutes. Then you're fine, as long as it's consistent across the board. It can't be, for this motion, we're gonna allow 2 minutes, for the next motion, we're gonna allow 3 minutes. And you guys are never like that. I don't know any of the cities that are like that. It's always, no, you're good. It's always consistent across the board, and you have to let them speak their 2 minutes. And if they wanna get up and talk on every agenda item, you gotta let them do it. Yeah, so, where are we at?
The last slide said you had the option to adjourn the meeting. Can you say something about that?
Another approach, adjourn the meeting. I would say that there is probably if things are getting out of hand in the sense that you're no longer in the bounds of talking about something that's relevant to the city, where I'm just ragging on you about nothing to do with the city. I'm like, I hate you, I hate the color of your hair, I hate your glasses, and then I start throwing obscenities at you. I think at that point, that's when I'm saying, that's maybe when you adjourn the meeting. So not because I don't like what you're saying about a development. I don't mean for that to come across that way at all.
That would then end the entire meeting.
I believe.
The best example of that, Ross, is when there's a constituent in Key West who has a vendetta against the mayor. He comes every meeting and he just pounds on the mayor. And so the mayor and he go at it in one of the commission meetings, and the mayor says, escort him out of here. He's beyond the bounds of free speech. The guy brings a lawsuit for violation of his First Amendment rights, false arrest, and all kinds of things. And the city winds up paying the guy a bunch of money for being a gadfly. And so if things are getting out of hand and they're getting heated or that sort of thing, then usually I'll talk to the mayor or suggest, hey, how about if we take 5 minutes, take a water break, let everything cool down, and reschedule, and redo it. Now, if it continues, then perhaps adjourn the meeting that night. But I don't think I've ever been in a situation where somebody gets escorted out under law enforcement. And, you know, I've always tried to cool that down and not have that sort of thing happen. So we take a 5-minute break and come back, and, you know, as attorney, I'd go up to the constituent and say, look, let's calm down and make your point, and then let's all move on. And maybe read the rules of civility, you know, and just say, here's how we operate. You don't have a right to go in and you know, do things and say things that are creating such conflict that we can't get our business done.
Sure.
I really hope we never have that in any of our cities. Again, so they have a right to be heard. That's the whole point of the Sunshine Law, is so that they can participate. Again, it's not an absolute right, as Scott was just saying. If someone were to get so out of hand that they were no longer in line with decorum as we expect, that would be an instance in which we would address a different handling of how we would normally handle public comment or individuals commenting.
Don't lock the doors of City Hall.
Dang.
Not a good
idea. Minutes, again, you guys are very fortunate to have really great city staff and city clerks. They must be written, they have to be promptly recorded, and they need to contain all significant decisions, votes, actions, significant points of discussion. They can't be, Kirsten showed up tonight, meeting adjourned. So you guys know how it goes. Your city clerks, like I said, are really on it. We're very fortunate. And so the scope of the Sunshine. So it applies to all of your elected and appointed boards. So if you all have boards who aren't necessarily decision-making boards, but are rather advisory committees, if they are appointed, the Sunshine Law applies. So for, I think is P&Z and High Springs, they're advisory, right? So P&Z and High Springs, for example, is advisory. They're appointed, though. So while their decisions are taken into consideration at the city commission meeting and they're not binding, they're still subject to Sunshine Law. And so Sunshine Law applies to when you have 2 or more members of the same board that are meeting to discuss something that could come before their board or the commission. And this isn't really relevant for you guys, but the judiciary and the legislature are not subject to Sunshine Law, so we do not have the right to march into Tallahassee and demand to sit in on the legislation meetings. Okay, again, so what is a meeting? And that's when you start to get into how you can violate the Sunshine Law. Commissioners, I'm sure you all know at this point, but you all have to be very careful about meeting with each other outside of City Hall, having conversations about things that could come before the commission. You cannot do that. You can go out, you see each other in the grocery store. You don't have to be rude to one another. That's not at all what we're saying. But I can't, if I'm a commissioner and I see Ricky at Publix, I can't say to him, hey, how about that thing that we're voting on this week? That's going to be a no. It's a violation of the Sunshine Law. The public doesn't have access to your conversation. You're having a meeting not in a public place in front of a public body where minutes are being recorded, where it was noticed, everything that I've run you through and beaten into you for the past 10 minutes. And this applies to more than just your conversations in Publix or your conversations walking into City Hall. These are text messages, these are emails, these are phone calls. If you snail mail it counts. The other issue that we're running into now, and we'll talk about it a little bit with public records in a bit, is Facebook posts. We are on the same wavelength. Yeah. That is a good point. So if I'm a commissioner and I post something on Facebook and I post something such that another commissioner feels some sense of obligation to comment on it, you're outside of the public scope. It's a violation of the Sunshine Law. You cannot do it. Best practice is to not engage with each other on Facebook. Stay off Facebook. My mom would be delighted if I'd stay off Facebook. So. Sunshine Law is broadly construed. The courts, if it gets to a court, are likely going to construe it against you. The exceptions are very narrowly construed. The court, unless you fall perfectly into the exception, such as Kirsten was talking earlier today, shade meetings, which happen during terms of litigation, and it's recorded by a court reporter, that's an exception. It's statutorily defined. The court is going to side with you on that one. The issue is when you start getting outside of those very specifically designated exceptions, and you're trying to make it fit for your case. Best practice is to not err on the side of caution. Call your city attorney's office. Please don't talk to each other about things that are going to come before your commission or council amongst yourselves. So exceptions to sunshine, social functions, like we're here tonight. So the question being like, how are you all here tonight? We're not talking about city business. We're not talking about things that are going to come before your respective boards or your commissions or your councils. You're not talking to each other about that kind of stuff. We're talking about ethics and how not to get in trouble. Again, litigation, like I just said, shade meetings, those are recorded via a court reporter. They are a special exception. Collective bargaining, do you want to speak on collective bargaining agreements and not being sunshine law? Andrea Special? Collective bargaining? Oh, Dave's got it.
So they're not subject to the sunshine law. There's a specific exemption in the statute, the Florida statutes, to say that a meeting with the governing body to talk about labor negotiations is not. It's not a shade meeting. It's just accepted under state law from the sunshine law. So you can do that. One thing I want to mention, though, is you might have mentioned this, but the sunshine law does not require a body that's subject to the sunshine law to have an agenda. So if you wanted to have a county commission, if you wanted to have a city council meeting with no agenda, you could. You still have to have minutes. You couldn't take any action without an agenda very well, but you could get together in the sunshine where everybody can see it and talk about issues. We did this for that purpose for many times, and we got criticized for it in this county. It was referred to as the meeting before the meeting, and after even a grand jury investigation, it was sustained as being legal. No agenda. Yeah, there's no action.
The only thing that I will add to that is based on the statutory requirements. A lot of you all's charters, a lot of you all's ordinances have more specific requirements which are more stringent than the state law. So the state law is the minimum, and then your municipalities build upon those requirements. So some of you are required to have agendas per your charter or ordinances. And if you have questions about that, who are we asking? The city attorney. Yay. Okay. Back to Danielle. Appreciated the sit break. Next slide. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, I'm gonna back up a little. So this was a case where the local school board took a trip on a bus to see neighborhoods for potential new schools. And it showed that there was unrefuted evidence that they took every precaution to avoid violating the sunshine law. They sat apart, they didn't discuss the locations. Because they gathered in a confined space and undoubtedly had the opportunity at that time to make decisions outside of public scrutiny, it was a violation of the sunshine law. That goes back to Charles's question about appearances, and I think that you all will find that appearances go a long way. So sometimes it's not always that a violation quite literally occurred, but as we see here, you had the opportunity, you had the chance, you were outside of the public scope. Those are going to be issues that you start to run into, so please don't get on a bus together anytime soon. This was, again, where we start talking about emails. Even if someone is outside of the decision-making process, so for example, we have the superintendent engaging in these emails, but there are other people engaging in these emails as well who are part of the voting board.
you're outside of the sunshine, you cannot have these conversations. Next slide. Water management district. I was gonna say, I don't remember reading this one actually. Action on energy. Oh, this was kind of what Dave was saying about how not all places are required to have an agenda, and so adding an item to an agenda or not adding an item to an agenda may not affect you. But like Kirsten said, most of your cities do require agendas, so please don't take that as gospel.
What did the previous slide say about the superintendent?
I'm not sure, it was bad angle. So he was part of the decision-making process. So So when you have influence over contracting on behalf of the city, this is a superintendent, obviously, but for argument's sake, let's say it's a non-voting mayor, but you are involved in the process of contracting the city with something. Scott's walking towards me, so I think he wants to.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on with that, Danielle, and I would have to look at this case to find out what the facts are, but what I think was going on is that the superintendent was sharing that Kirsten is going to vote this way. Danielle, what's your thoughts on it in emails? And so I think that was where the violation occurred. We'd look at the case specifically, but it's sometimes it's called daisy chaining.
Is that a case law there?
Yeah, Linares versus, yes. So you can't say, hey, this commissioner is going to vote this way. What are your thoughts? Or even imply that, really. But I'll look at the case up.
What are you going to get? Oh, is this for Scott?
So essentially, just to give, because there seems to be some interest in this particular case, this was an instance in which there was a committee formed by the school board planning director, which was composed of parents, principals, and the director, which was charged with making recommendations to the superintendent on proposed school attendance boundaries. So because the director was on that advisory board, on that board, the Sunshine Law applied to him because he's part of the entity which is making a recommendation for the decision to be finally made by the commission, or by the school board in this instance. So that is what makes the Sunshine Law apply. So not because of his activity on the school board, but because he was on this committee, which was advising. It's the same thing that we talked about earlier regarding planning and zoning.
So it sounds like this is pretty unique that.
Right. And that is case law for you. Very, very specific rulings on very specific facts.
There are some cases out there where the city manager is leaving and they have one person appointed by the council to winnow down the candidates who have applied for. We've got 50 candidates for the new city manager position, and we want you to winnow it down to 5. And committee of 1, and that has been ruled to be, you have to keep all your notes, you have to keep all of the information as to how you winnow down that 50-member list to just 5, because it's part of the deliberation process, and we have now, as a commission, appointed you with a position to winnow that down, so that there's cases out there that is part of the public record, and you have to make all of that available.
Okay, so what happens if I violate the Sunshine Law? You be removed from office. We go back to your attorney's fees. Scott had previously touched on this, that if you're found in violation, you cannot recoup. It's actually a second-degree misdemeanor, which record-conscious folks, and a punishable up to a fine of $500 or 60 days imprisonment. They really don't want you to violate this one. Okay, so what happens if what happens if a meeting happens It's not publicly noticed, the public doesn't get there, they make a decision. They pass a resolution. We convened, we passed a resolution. It is not effective. It has no legal validity. So you can have, no, you can't have your secret meeting. But if you were to have your secret meeting and you passed a resolution, it would not be enforceable. You could not utilize it. And again, the next point kind of gets back to what Scott was talking about daisy chains, is that by being elusive and trying to skip around the Sunshine Law by playing these games where you're communicating through other people, the court does not find that amusing. Please don't do it. Yeah, the last 2 points I'm not even going to encourage. So next slide, please. Okay, I thought this was hysterical, and I'm sure their city attorney did not think it was very funny, but 4 of the 5 city council members in Jacksonville just went out for a beer. And they were photographed doing it. That was not good. They claimed that they weren't discussing anything. Bystanders said that they overheard them discussing city business. It's still pending, but I think we can all take a good guess as to where that's going. And the appearance, yes, back to the appearance. So, and that's the thing, is that it's your word against those around you. So even if there's not an audio recording, the appearance here is not good. I pulled that picture up, and every single one of you I saw go, you know, not great. So some people may announce their name and address before speaking in public comment. You cannot require them to do that. If they want to do that, excuse me? I don't think you can require that, no. Lots of them.
Marion County School Board in their public meetings were requiring anyone that had anything to say to give their name and their address. So finally one day somebody says, I'm uncomfortable giving my address. I don't even want to give you my name. Well, this is what we require if you want to get up at the podium and speak. We have to know who you are. We want to make sure that you are living in the right precinct and blah, 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 and all that other stuff. So.
I'm glad I'm not their city attorney.
That's Marion
I
County.
believe you. But the question for those of you who are not in this room was Marion County School Board, you said, was requiring people to announce their name and address prior to speaking. They said if you didn't do it, you couldn't speak. In my mind, and Scott may disagree, but you're placing an unreasonable boundary in between someone and their ability to exercise their First Amendment rights.
You're absolutely right. And the other idea behind it is that you're a resident of our city. You're not a resident of our city, so your opinion is not as important to us, and so you get on a slippery slope. We almost always ask for, you know, your name and address and that sort of thing when you get up and speak, but it's not required, and you cannot require somebody to do that. So if they say, I'm uncomfortable giving my address, you know, think of it, there could be a million reasons why somebody doesn't want to give their address. Maybe they're a firefighter, and maybe they're a police officer. Maybe they're, so there's specific exemptions statutorily. Maybe that person is getting up and they have a domestic violence injunction that is, and they don't want to say what their address, I mean, there's a million reasons why somebody can say, and really at the end of the day, it's not important if that person lives in the city, lives outside the city, lives in Alaska. You know, if they want to get up and under our First Amendment rights, they want to give their opinion on something, they get to give their opinion. And you can't require them to do that.
So is that name and/or name?
You can't require somebody to give their name. Again, there's probably a number of reasons.
Address?
Or the address. And if they say, I'm uncomfortable doing that, I don't want to do that, okay, well, tell us what it is that you want to talk about.
You just can't require them.
That's right.
If you ask them that in order to speak at this meeting, we need to know your name, and they say, no, I won't give it to you, that's the end of the story.
That's the end. That's exactly right, Charles. Exactly right.
And you may disagree, I would even be hedgy with saying we need to know your name and address. I think we would like to know your name and address. Something to that nature. I think if you start placing words that reflect a requirement in order to speak, I think that's when you start to get into really dangerous territory of infringing on someone's First Amendment right. Yeah, I wouldn't. You must. In order to speak, you must. You may state your name. We ask that you state your name. We would like to know your name. Things to that nature are permissive. It gives them an option. You're not telling them, if you don't do this, you cannot speak. So that would be what I would caution.
Town of Micanopy had traditionally always requested and insinuated requirement of name and address, but recently, thanks to you all, we've been educated, and what we're doing now is we're asking, would you please let us know your name, simply because we need it for public record, because we do have detailed names that are translated for everyone. The thing that remains with me is, with a town the size of ours, our funds are limited in what we can and cannot do. So when the town approaches a project, and we are talking about cost and planning, and people do come from the outside that feel like they belong in town, but they technically don't pay the taxes to live in town, and therefore are not supporting whatever it is that we are doing. They would then benefit from having it there, because they spend a lot of time with us. We tend to want to say, well, I'm sorry, but in this particular case, you really don't have a dog in the hunt. And is there anything wrong with that? Is that something we should not go there? We should consider everyone as a participant? Thank you, Kirsten.
Hello. Yes, so I'm going to take this question because I do most of the work in the town of Micanopy. The question is, a lot of the time there is a desire, I think is a natural desire among people on a commission when someone comes up to comment, that you want to know if I'm going to be spending money on the project that this citizen would like me to be spending money on or as a proponent of. I'd like to know whether or not they have a dog in the fight. Can I require their address? Can I say, no, you can't speak because you don't have a dog in the fight? Any of that business. The answer to that is no. For the record, I would like to say the town of Micanopy has not done that, at least in no meeting I've ever been to. Right, so we do have to, part of the First Amendment is that anyone, I could fly to, Jacksonville right now and say, hey, I want to talk in the public meeting. I don't live in Jacksonville. I've never lived in Jacksonville. About public yachts, and I would be able to talk for however long their rules allow me to speak on that topic. So there's absolutely no requirement that someone must live in the city or must have a dog in the fight, so to speak. Oftentimes, you all know the people that live in your towns, you all know the people that live in your cities, you're familiar, you have familiar faces that show up at commission meetings, but you can't say you can speak because you live here and you can't speak because you don't live here.
Sounds like you might have a follow-up question.
So for example, the Florida statute 286, 01, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
when it talks about recording, it says the entire session shall be recorded by a certified court reporter. Reporter shall record the names, the times of the commencement and termination of the session, all discussion of proceedings, the names of all persons present at any time, and the names of all persons speaking.
What you're reading from right now is Section 8, which talks about the shade meetings. The question was, part of the Florida statute says that you have to record, it has to be recorded by a certified court reporter, and you have to have the names of all the individuals who are speaking. The section that's being referenced in this question has to do with shade meetings, which are obviously something a little bit separate from our regular public meetings.
This is chapter 286. Business Title 19.
Incorrect. And you have scrolled down to section 8, I believe paragraph, right, it'll be a subsection, it'll be parentheses. I can talk to you about it a little bit more later, but that's what we're referencing.
Will you hit? Okay, prayer and meetings. This is something that we have had a lot of discussion about with a lot of our cities. I'm going to defer to Dave on some of the historical knowledge here. Town of Greece v. Galloway is the Supreme Court case on this. And as most of you know, the Supreme Court is our highest court in the land. They defer to no one. They ruled that opening a board meeting with prayer does not violate the Establishment Clause. However, when you have a commissioner who offers prayer, and it has the effect of affiliating the government with one religion or one specific faith or belief, the Establishment Clause is violated. So you're going to be looking for, we call them trigger words. When we talk about it, we talk about trigger words. Christ, Jesus, Allah. We do not make reference to those in our prayers. Dave, did you want to provide some institutional knowledge?
So, the rule used to be that you'd have to have a rotation of different pastors of all denominations coming in to do the opening prayer. This changes that some, but still allows it. So that's the way I read it, yeah.
And I do want to note that the last case is a Supreme Court case out of South Carolina. It's not the Supreme Court for the trigger words. That is just what we have as, are you sure? South Carolina. Oh, I apologize. I misspoke. Please erase everything I just said from your memory.
So, a lot of our cities are really good about this, and they involve different denominations, and I think that really gets you on the safer side of this issue. You might have a Baptist minister that comes in and provides the invocation, and then you might have somebody from the Krishna, the Hindu religion, and then you might have a Muslim.
Atheist. You have atheists say no on separation of church and state.
That's so as long as you have that sort of opportunity. Now, sometimes you can't fulfill that. In our cities, we're smaller cities, and so we don't have the diversity necessarily, but we have the invitation out for differing religions to come in and speak to the fact that there is a higher creator. The benefit is if we don't use that language specifically, but I guess I'm probably not going to stop a preacher from giving his prayer before the meeting, and try to go on the rotational basis. That's They can't, and I think if you have a rotation as well. Oh, I'm sorry.
We're just repeating the question. The question was a member of the public versus a commissioner saying these words. So all of these rules that we're talking about, none of them apply to members of the public. They only apply to you. You have special position, you have special powers as representatives of your community, and so you fall under special rules. And there are certain things that you can't do between the starting gavel and the ending gavel, and that's just the way the First Amendment works. So any further questions on that I can take after, but I want to make sure we get through public records before we adjourn for the night.
Public records are super important. I think we're almost there. We're there. Public records. This is our last section for the evening, and then I will release you on your own recognizance. So, public records. Every person has the right to inspect a copy of any public record made or received in connection with official business. So, we're going to talk a lot about what that means. That's going to be your statutory definition that we fall back on. That's going to be what your public records custodian is saying to you when you're asking about, why do I have to produce this document? This is going to be your basis for everything that we're about to go through. Okay, confidential versus exempt. They both require statutory authorization. An exempt record is one that the agency is neither required nor prohibited to disclose. A confidential record is one that is not subject to inspection and that may not be released except to a person authorized by statute. The city is going to bear the burden of proving the right to an exemption. So you'll hear your city clerks a lot of the times in these cities are the public records custodians. And you'll hear your city clerk say, I need to know the reason for why I'm redacting this piece of information or why we're not providing this document. They're going to tell you that they have to provide reasoning and a response to why we're not disclosing this piece of the public record. So exemptions are only the legislature may exempt records from public disclosure. So this is not something that the city or the town can decide, we're no longer going to disclose this kind of document. This is something that only the legislature can determine. There's a very long list, 119.071, I believe, is going to be your list of exemptions in the Florida statute. Exemptions are going to be strictly construed. Like I said before, Florida has really broad public record laws. We like open government. We like our citizens to know what's going on. We'd like them to feel included. So more times than not, things are going to be disclosed. Again, what I just said before, if you're not disclosing something due to an exemption, you're going to bear the burden of proving that exemption. So confidential records, EMS records that contain patient information, social security numbers, work papers related to the internal audit of the city. This is a weird one because it does become public record once the audit's final. So kind of similar to the idea of shade meetings and how those records are made of what's said during the shade meeting while the litigation's ongoing. It's not discoverable. You can't put it out. Once the litigation comes to an end, it becomes public record. So notes. This is a big thing. I sit in commission meetings, city council meetings, town council meetings, town commission meetings, and I see commissioners are writing notes to themselves. They're trying to remember what's going on. They're trying to remember who's saying what. They're trying to remember how they want to move. And so the question becomes, are my notes public record? So notes that you make to yourself are not public record. However, this is a huge thing, because I get it, you write yourself notes, you think it's never going to see the light of day. If you use your notes to perpetuate, communicate, or formalize knowledge, it is public record. If you keep your notes weeks go by, you don't do anything with your notes. Nothing happens to them. Right now, they're not public record. The second you refer to those notes to perpetuate something, or to communicate something, or to formalize something, they become public record. You may not say at that point, these are my notes, I don't have to give them to you. No, you use those notes to perpetuate, communicate, or formalize something in regards to city business or town business. I'm so sorry, I keep saying city and I forget that we do have a lovely town with us tonight. And again, if the notes are used to generate another document, so a lot of the times I personally will sketch out the skeleton of what I'm wanting to say in an ordinance, and then I type it all out. My notes of how I want to do this are public record, if I'm a city commissioner, for example, or city staff. The attorney bit, we have a little bit, it gets a little murky there, whether the attorneys have to turn stuff over in regards to litigation and whatnot. But as soon as I use my notes to do something, to perpetuate, to formalize, to communicate city business, they become public record. I really can't stress that enough. So again, the first bullet point is what I was just typing on. There is not an unfinished business or draft exemption. You may not say, this is a draft, it's not done, therefore it's not a public record. It is a public record. Doesn't matter if it was a bad draft. I write bad drafts too. It happens to all of us. It's still public record. You still are going to be required to disclose it if it's requested. Obviously, this isn't, we're just handing out drafts. Okay, some fun questions to cover what we just went over. The city manager takes handwritten personal notes to assist in remembering matters discussed during manager's interviews of city employees. No one has seen the notes. Is it a public record? Over here paying attention, we got good answers coming in.
What's the answer?
So it's not a public record as long as the notes haven't been used to communicate, formalize, or perpetuate knowledge. So, you know, if those notes go with you to the grave, you're safe.
Huh?
If
So you suffer until you go to the grave.
You know, please throw them away at some point. So, sticky note. Kirsten? No. If you're making notes about non-city business, you're safe. Again, I'm really hammering home the communicate, formalize, perpetuate. So when you guys get copies of this presentation, I apologize. If you were to do a Control F, you're going to find that phrase a lot.
Just something really quick to add here is that a lot of the time when we think about communicate knowledge, that means between you all as well. It means if you are a commissioner or a non-voting mayor or a non-voting member of a board for whatever other reason, and you make a note to yourself and then you give it to the city clerk, that is communicating the knowledge. It doesn't have to be communicating the knowledge to someone outside the city. Communicating the knowledge to any living being, aside from, I suppose, an animal, although if you communicated it to your dog, I would still say that you should probably disclose it as public record at that point. But it doesn't have to be someone in the city or someone outside the city for it to be communicating the knowledge. It could be someone inside the city as well. So those inter-office memorandums, all of that kind of thing, that is still public record. So that's a really important note, somewhere that often we get tripped up.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, social media. So we kind of talked about this before, and we were hitting on commissioners discussing things on Facebook. But your official Facebook, Instagram, I don't know if y'all are on TikTok, Twitter, Reddit, I'm going to hit as many as I can think of, Snapchat, Pinterest. We want to know what's on your Pinterest board.
Getter, Parler.
Yes, Parler. If you're using your official account, it's public record. If you're utilizing your private account to discuss city business, you need to preserve the record. It is public record. So what do we recommend then? Have a public account, have a private account. Use your private account for sharing pictures of your dogs and your kids and your cats and your grandkids and where you went this weekend and all the fun things you're doing in your life to share with friends and family. Use your public account for city business. But again, please don't interact with other commissioners' Facebook posts. No deletions. I cannot emphasize this enough. Do not delete things. Don't delete your Facebook messages. Don't delete your text messages. A lot of our cities now have engaged with companies to do archiving, and it makes your lives really easy to not have to think about, oh, is this a text that I need to hold on to for the next X number of years? I know that one of our cities actually right now is working on finalizing a contract to do that, so don't delete anything. If you don't have one of those systems, please do not delete anything. And so what's best practice? If I'm texting on my personal phone and I get it, people in your communities know you. They know your personal cell phone numbers. You've lived in the area forever. Everybody's friends with everybody. Somebody shoots you a text about a zoning issue that's about to come forth. Screenshot it and forward it to your city email. Chances are you're not deleting things from your city email. Hopefully you're not. Please don't delete things from your city email. Forward it to a city device, forward it to your city email so that it's going to be preserved for the record should it ever be asked of you.
Disclose that it was an ex parte communication.
If it's a quasi-judicial, like for in my instance, if I said it was about land use, you're probably going to have a quasi-judicial hearing about the issue. If someone's texting you about it, it's probably a hot topic. And if if you then go into a quasi-judicial hearing, you need to disclose it as an ex parte communication. Tying everything together here, y'all. That means we must be getting close to the end. Again, please do not interact with each other on social media about city business. I'm just going to leave it at that. I've unfortunately for y'all drilled you with that. Dave.
My question is this: how does this software work? Say you've got commissioner receives or sends text message about government business, and on personal phone, personal mobile device. We know where it's stored right now, it's stored on that device. But is there there's no automatic way that can be stored and then held for the required times?
Right, so to send it to your city email. So the question was, these software companies that archive things for you don't generally get used on your personal cell phones for good reason. You don't need the 900 pictures of your cat that your spouse sent to you. And what Dave was asking was, so what happens in that instance when someone texts you on your personal phone? And he was clarifying that the best methodology is then to forward it to a city device to your city email.
So have you heard about TextGate in Orange County back about 2012? Here's what happened. There was a really contested hearing on an ordinance adoption, and county commissioners were actually, during the meeting, texting people in the audience. So at the end of the meeting, of course, one side of this issue was upset, and so they made a public records request. 3 of the county commissioners decided the best course of action was to delete all the text that they had sent or received. And so the people, they figured out what happened down there, and the county got a public records lawsuit for all the records. In the meantime, the state attorney convened a grand jury and determined that the 3 elected commissioners who had deleted, the 3 county commissioners who had deleted the text had violated state law by intentionally destroying a public record, 3rd-degree felony. And they ended up having to pay $500 fines. And the county ended up settling the case and paying about $70,000 of attorney's fees to the other side. So I was hearing all this as county attorney here in Alachua County, and I noticed in meetings that a bunch of the county commissioners were carrying, guess what, these devices around. And everybody's like, this was like 2013. I mean, everybody has a mobile device then, and now it's even more common. And so I thought that I should, so I called our IT director and I said, are you capturing all these commissioners' text messages that may be about county government, about, be subject to the public records law because they're about county business? And the answer was no. I said, why not? You're capturing all the emails, right? They go through your server. I said, well, we don't have the budget to pay for that now. So being proactive and knowing if the tapioca hit the air conditioner, and I hadn't advised them as to what was going on, I'd be on point for criticism, and the county would be embarrassed. I decided at one of their conference room meetings to bring this up. I asked the chair, let me bring it up. And so at that time, we weren't capturing the employees' text messages. And so the county manager had established a policy that county employees cannot use their private mobile device to text about county business. And that was my policy as county attorney too, because we had no way to preserve it. And having somebody go through a step after the fact is not going to work all the time. And somebody's got the other side of that communication is a record, unless they deleted it. And so I suggested to the county commission that they establish a policy for themselves, all 5 of them, because they weren't subject to the manager's policy on text messages. And we started talking about it in there. Well, one of the county commissioners said, oh, how's everybody getting everything done? How can you get anything done if you can't text? And so, so they went on with this, and finally this one county commissioner looked down at me and said, we're just going to start calling you Dinosaur Dave. And I think what's happened now, although this is a little bit fuzzy to me that we're relying on human beings to remember to take a screenshot of a text, but that may work. It's better to have software that will automatically capture that. I think that software exists, but I don't know that. Okay. So that's good. That's good. Yeah.
That information stays on the company server, the T-Mobile servers, all those companies, they have it. They do have what they call end-to-end encryption software, such as Signal, who's trying to keep everything private. But it does not mean that the government itself can call upon Signal to look at my records, even though I think they're fine, even though I delete them from my device, it's still in Signal's information. And they're trying to fight releasing any information to law enforcement or government or anything.
Because of privacy?
Yeah.
Because of privacy. I mean, that's the big fight right now, is like everything you do online, no matter what it is, somebody's watching. Somebody's got a record of it. And you're not, you know, it's not your business.
Watch what you do if you're cell phone.
Yeah, please be cognizant of using your city cell. Just best practice is to use your city cell phone to conduct city business. If in the off chance it happens on your private phone, please send the records to your city email, your city phone. This was one of the cases. Actually, I think it's a relatively March of 2022. A husband was a commissioner sitting on the dais during a commission meeting texting his wife. And I don't remember exactly how it gets out that he was texting his wife. But someone puts in a public records request because presumably, according to these people, they were like, oh, he must be texting about official city business. Come to find out, the texts were like, can you pick up milk on the way home? So in that case, his texts were not public record. It was a whole hullabaloo. We had to go, not we, but they went through a court case on it to get to the end to say the texts were not about city business. They were about things as, getting milk from the grocery store on your way home. And that's just so again, you have to retain records. You cannot delete them. You cannot throw them away. The state has adopted a retention schedule. It can be very specific. If you have questions about that, I'm happy to get you the information in specificity of what you're looking for. Formatting issues. So I'm going to read this to you, and then I'm going to tell you now that there's a caveat to this. So hold before you accept this as final. If the city maintains a record in a certain format, the city is not required to reformat the document to what the requester is wanting it to be in. For example, I have PDF records of an email. If the requester says, I want them in Word, no. You don't have to do that. The city maintains the records in PDF. The exception to this rule is ADA compliance. If, for example, screen readers were, thankfully, have really elevated folks who are blind and their ability to participate in reading PDFs. And so a screen reader reads your PDF out loud such that you can receive the information that's on the document. The issue is that regular PDFs, a lot of the time, are not compatible with screen readers, so you have to convert it into a PDF-A, I believe. Please don't quote me on that. I'm fairly certain it's PDF-A. But, so if someone is requesting and they say, hey, I'm blind, I utilize a screen reader, please format it in a PDF-A. This is not an example of something where you can say, well, we only keep it in PDF. We're not required to change it. So please be cognizant of the ADA. If you have a request like that come in, please contact the city attorney's office. We're happy to help walk you through it and to address it. You might have questions of, is this, isn't this? If you have a question, I would rather all of us make the decision together and evaluate it together as opposed to a lone rogue decision. Okay, public records requests. We've seen an uptick in a lot of cities about people who aren't the city clerk getting public records requests. You as a city employee may not tell them that they have to go to the city clerk. You have to take that information in, and you have to get it to whoever it needs to get to in your city. You may not require them to put it in writing. You can write it down. Actually, it's probably a good idea to write it down. You may not require their name. You can require, you know, how do you want to pick these records up? That's different. Do you want to email to you? Do you want to come get them? But public records requests are permitted to be anonymous. So I have access to public records. I don't have to tell you, I'm Danielle Adams, here's where I live, anything like that. They don't have to show a special or legitimate interest. If I have a morbid curiosity and something is a public record, I have access to the public record. Unlimited requests are allowed. We have people who are very active in wanting to know what local governments are doing. You cannot stop them. However, you do not have to continue to provide public records requests if they are delinquent on their fees owed from a previous public records request. So if Andrea requests 100 documents and we quote Andrea X number of dollars to complete the request for copying fees, whatever, and Andrea gets the documents and then decides she's not going to pay. And then next month, Andrea comes in, I want 100 more documents. No, we can tell her, we can't fulfill your request until you get leveled up on what you owe. You're also not required to comply with standing requests. So someone can't say, every month, I want you to send me Mike News phone bill. Every month you can go in and request Mike News phone bill. But every month, I can't just sit that blanket request out there and think that every month the city is going to comply with my public records request. So again, the big thing is that you can't impose conditions that act as a barrier. They have to be dealt with in a timely manner. Your city clerks or your public records custodian are very sensitive to what a timely manner is. They've been doing this a long time. We're very lucky, like I've said before. If you have questions on what is a timely manner, happy to go through it with you. You have to respond in good faith. You can't open the filing cabinet and go, didn't see anything in there, and slam it shut. You have to do your best to find the records that they're wanting and that are asking to be produced. You can't deny for something being overbroad, but you can ask for more specificity. You can say, are you looking for this? You can't say, this was really broad, we're not going to do it. You also can't deny on the grounds that records are maintained by another agency. So a lot of the times, for example, the city clerk or someone in the city clerk's office will get a public records request for something going on in the police department. The city clerk's office can't go, not me. They have to go through the chain of getting to the police department, conveying the public records request, getting the documents from the police department, and then producing the documents. So again, this goes back to you can't deny because they're not in your physical possession. You need to do a good faith effort to get the documents. And for commissioners, the thing that you all will see a lot of the times is people wanting to see your emails, your text messages regarding public business, city business. So this goes back to don't delete things. And it can't be, for example, I am the public records custodian, I say, Andrea, I need your text messages regarding such and such. Andrea can't do one cursory scroll through her phone and go, nope, nothing in there. If you know it's in there, you probably do know, you guys have really good memories, but you need to look for it too. There needs to be an active effort to locate the documents that the requester is requesting. So this gets back to what we were talking about with exemptions. If you're going to deny a public records request, you have to have a basis for the exemption. So again, when you're telling someone they can't have access to a document, for example, the shade meetings, because we're talking about those a lot tonight, that court reporter transcript, someone puts in a public records request, the litigation is still ongoing. You're going to deny the public records request because the litigation is still ongoing. But you can't just deny it and say we're not going to produce those records. You have to say we're denying because the litigation is ongoing. Once the litigation is ceased, it will become a public record. You can't require that it be in writing. We've talked about this. It can be oral. People can pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, I'm putting in a public records request. This is what I want. So a lot of the times, the other thing that we'll see is we'll see emails. So, for example, firefighters are a protected class. And there are certain statutory provisions that don't allow certain pieces of their information to be disclosed in a public record. If I have an email that's 9 emails long, an email chain, and in one of them I have, for example, the firefighter's address, I can't not disclose the email because it has this, but we're going to redact it. So that's going to be redacted, and again, you have to provide an explanation for why you're redacting it. This is a wrap-up. I'm only 4 minutes over. I'll be brief. I'll be fast. If you think it's wrong, it probably is. Don't get yourself into a situation that tempts dishonor. Is there anyone who gives you something who doesn't want or expects something in return except your mother, and you can't even be sure about her? People don't give elected officials or government employees gifts because they like them, but because they want something from you. Can you accept a gift that does not influence you? I'll leave you with that. Thank you all for attending this evening. We appreciate your patience as we worked through the AV stuff. And thank you to our AV team. You guys were great. We really appreciate it. I think...
Who supplied the food?
Fresh Kitchen. Fresh Kitchen supplied the food. Nothing but Bunt Cakes supplied those little cakes that y'all had going around.
Very nice.
Your local Publix supplied the drinks. We like... It's just it's a funny video about the concept of Florida Man. We've kept you guys late enough though. I'll send you all a YouTube link. Yes. We know you're tired. We know you want to go home. City of Lake City and Live Oak, thank you guys for tuning in this evening. We really appreciate it. Get home safe, y'all.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming. Good employee.